Hello, I'm Mika Mänz, and you are here with us in the House of Innovation I/O studio, and we are streaming live from the 12 Hours Us 2020 edition. And in the last days, we were discussing how society is getting disrupted, and our special view here from Stuttgart was on technology, questioning us if technology can help us to create a better world. And therefore, we invited now, as I said, from Washington, D.C., Bouthenia Guermazi, Director of Digital Development at the World Bank. Welcome. And we have Professor Dr. Alexander Görlach, who is dialed in from New York City, if I'm right. Hello. I'm very pleased to have you two here in this conference, and our topic is how we can shape a new era. And maybe Bouthenia, switching to you first. If we were in Washington, D.C., I may not ask that question, but in this online conference, I will. What is the World Bank's target and aim currently? Can you give us some insights about your organization, and can you tell us a little bit about your role as digital director there?
Thank you. So yes, I'm director for the digital development global practice in the World Bank. This is a new global practice that was created about 2 years ago. Previously, we were dealing with telecom issues, with ICT issues. Now, with technology really developing, a separate global unit to deal with digital development was created. So I work for a development institution, and our goal is to help client governments work on eradicating extreme poverty and making sure that there is a shared prosperity. And these two goals are possible and can be fast-tracked if digital solutions are a key component of how we think about development.
It sounds great. And then switching to Alexander. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. From your perspective, can you give us a little bit background? What is your daily business currently?
So I'm a university professor, honorary professor of ethics and theology. I work on secularism, pluralism, but I also have another strand, which is like the future of democracy. So my last book was called Homo Empathicus, and it was dealing with like the age of resentment represented by populists and the age of empathy represented by the current world order. And obviously technology plays a big role in that arena. I'm the editor of a magazine on AI and ethics. It's called The Human Condition, Conditio Humana, like the book by Hannah Arendt. And I'm involved in several initiatives that deal with the societal implications of technological change.
Okay, thank you. I think what affected our society and us personally most in the last weeks is COVID-19, and there's no way to talk around that topic here. And we already saw in the last 2 days in that discussion some ideas how technology could help us to solve that. Maybe from the World Bank's and Bouthenia's perspective, what would you say is was technology helping us to handle this pandemic in a good way?
Absolutely. I think what we've seen over the past few weeks and few months is technology was the way for governments, for citizens, for businesses to cope with the new normal. So we've seen how the world has turned upside down and became virtual overnight. So in this context of social distances, when people and governments and businesses have access to hook to the virtual world, there was some possibilities to have business continuity. So the sector has been called several names over the past few months. It was called, the sector that came to the rescue. It was called the hidden hero. And it was really very clear for all of us the importance to tackle the issues around digital connectivity as a key component to cope with the pandemic. The other thing that was really clear is data, the importance of data on the health sector. So to understand how the pandemic is growing, to have intelligent solutions to flatten the curve, and also to know who are the main beneficiary of social assistance that need assistance, because it's difficult times for the poorer part of the countries, in any countries. So having data and IDs to know who these people are, to target their support. So it's been incredible feedback that we're getting from people and from industries. I think it also helped fast track digital transformation like no other time before. And it brought to the fore very clearly, as I mentioned earlier, the issues about digital divide. So, this is without digital tools, kids with families who do not have access to the internet are falling further behind. Businesses that can only work in the informal are being hit even more than before. So it clearly showed that this is a key component of thinking about, coping with the pandemic, and I hope also clearly a key component of thinking about how we build back better.
So bringing our society in that situation of a pandemic, that creates a lot of pressure to the politicians, to the rule makers, and you also mentioned data in healthcare. So we are directly connected to this discussion about data protection, and maybe that leads us also to the discussion how technology on the one hand can help us, but on the other hand also needs to be discussed from an ethic way here, especially when it comes to AI, which we have heard in the last 2 days is a truly game changer right now. Maybe we can discuss around that context a little bit, and Alexander, maybe you can help us to get your perspective on that. So we want to use data, we want to have the help by technology, by AI, but and we want to solve this pandemic situation. At that intersection, what's your opinion on that? What should we do, or what would you recommend us better to do that and what not?
Well, I mean, the time of the pandemic clearly showed us what a grand enhancer technology can be. But technology in itself has no context, if you want to say it like this, where you see like countries like the United States, Brazil, the United Kingdom, want to say like countries that are led by people who do not believe in science and therefore also not really in the benefits of technology. They have a very bad result in tackling the pandemic. But you look into countries like Taiwan, like a tiny island democracy, or New Zealand, and also Germany for that matter, which has leaders. These countries have leaders that are interested, and it's not even to say to believe in science. That's, in my opinion, that's nonsense. No? But they have found ways to implement and use these technologies to tackle climate change. And clearly, that's the big learning. And in Germany, we had huge discussions about the so-called Corona app and what are you willing to give in terms of data in order to serve the common good, which then also reflects on each individual, obviously. So this is a very nice new showcase on ethical behavior. And you see these memes in the internet, what you have to allow, let's say WhatsApp, like a whole array of things when you agree to their terms. And then you have like the list for the Corona app, and it's maybe 2 or 3 only, like points that where they will be looking into. So a public discourse about technology, I feel, is paramount. But also the debate about, like, let's say data is the commodity of the 21st century, but what does this mean in concretely? And that's like data, and that was shown to us in the pandemic, is also a public good that has to be and can be used for the benefit of all, or for at least the largest number of adherents of a society possible. And that's actually a great highlighting case of the splendor of liberal democracy that we could see in countries like Taiwan, New Zealand, or Germany.
Do you think that the countries who had the chance to have a higher stage of developing or technology developed environment had better chances to cope with COVID-19 than others? Is that something we can mark or figure out here?
You ask me. I mean, I think so. I mean, this is like the whole world is 190 whatever countries. So you can. This is just like showing a just one avenue. But you see, like the demonization of technology by Donald Trump, for instance, or in Brazil. I mean, I mentioned these countries. It is like fostering again to the overarching argument that I have, that politics of resentment are never producing anything positive. It's just like you see now the numbers of casualties in the United States are through the roof, and nobody really gives a damn, if I may say so. I live in Long Island City, and just a few kilometers around us, there's like all the hospitals where every day 1,000 people died. And of course, in a highly dense populated area like New York, the metropolitan area, where the subway is the lifeline, having an app, having aptitude in terms of public health, which is completely, or let's say almost completely absent in the whole of the United States. Of course, it questions then how much of a democracy or upholding a democratic society you can be if you do not have any democracy-based usage of data. And so if you want to say it this way, that could be like one takeaway out of this conversation, to see you have these two camps.
Okay, so Bouthenia, maybe switching to your perspective again, while talking about AI, this is a state-of-the-art technology, the latest trends and so on. How should I imagine that? Is that a technology which also can help emerging countries to improve their situation, that on their agendas, there are current questions for them, or are we talking about different basic infrastructures which we need to install first?
No, thank you so much. I think this is a great question. As we talk about technology in the 21st century, the way we want to even define infrastructure, I think we cannot define it without data and artificial intelligence as part of the definition. So when we talk about infrastructure, it's the broadband network, it's the pipes, it's the data, because data economy is what defines our lives now. And then artificial intelligence is a key element for it. Now, the question is, there is readiness in different countries in having the right environment to take advantage of technology. And as a development institution like ours, we work with countries to make sure as they bridge the gap in connectivity, we want to make sure that a new gap on the new technologies does not open and becomes very difficult to bridge. So in our discussion with our clients, as we talk about last mile connectivity and bringing fiber to the home, we also have in the discussion the importance of data, the importance of AI. AI is growing very fast. It will define competitive advantage of countries, and if the approach of developing countries is to wait to tackle it as a priority, it becomes a problem. And it's interesting that many countries around the world are having these discussions today. What would it take to have my country ready to take advantage of AI? And the discussion that we have all the time is think about the infrastructure, think about the governance system, think about the ethical dimension around AI. So it's a part of a big discussion that is contains different elements, as I mentioned, from infrastructure to skills, also to use the new technologies, having graduates on AI. So, and it's a fascinating topic because it goes also deep into some very detailed discussion about choice and ethics. So yes, definitely a topic for discussion in development these days.
So the title of our panel is Shaping a New Era. So both of you, you're talking to a lot of people. You have a lot of connections, your interviews, you're getting inputs, and you get inspired. What would you recommend me to put on my agenda? So how can I be a supporter and change or create change to shape this new era with AI? Do you have any use cases? Have you heard any good ideas in the last discussions you had you would recommend me I should have a look at?
The last weeks were not only the weeks of the pandemic, but here in the US also like of the biggest civil rights movement in the history of humankind, as it turned out, not only in the United States, in each state, but also like Berlin, for instance, and many other places in the world. People were protesting for equality and racial justice, like basically battling and combating racism and what comes with it. And that's something that's also pretty much related to data, because we are portrayed, we think like the data we see is like something objective, but it comes from somewhere, if you want to say. So, and we all carry our biases. You notice in your company maybe, and I had a company once, when you hire people, how you psychologically might be more inclined to hire somebody who resembles you. And I'm not even talking about racial differences or anything. Like we have these biases that are also unfortunately enhanced or made bigger by the use of technology. So I feel I spent like a few years at Harvard as in several capacities, and this is a place where you think, oh, it's like a liberal place, but no, there was also a history that is, of course, has to do with slave trade and how to deal with how originally with the natives of this country was dealt, also in the context of Harvard. So there is, what I want to say by these examples is there's not a single place in the world that does not need this sort of reflection. And what we learned in the last weeks here in America is that people of color would say like, yeah, but just why don't you listen for a moment? And like, so you can implement our data, if you want to translate it in the current flow of our discussion, you can implement my data into your, worldview. And I feel that's what's at the moment, what we got to do. If you ask me for something, for a concrete advice that I would be saying, like not taking the data as something, quasi-divine, but it comes from somewhere and it can also change.
Thank you. And switching to Bouthenia, what would you recommend me to put on the agenda to shape a new era in terms of technologies, maybe?
So I think, on AI specific, what I see the discussion, the topic is fascinating for sure. I think it is still a topic that attracts the attention of still a niche part of populations. And I think what would be extremely helpful is now that we show the importance of AI as an incredible tool for development. So we're starting to do that. We're starting to show that it's not a topic just for the technologists who are by very nature attracted to those topics. It's a topic about development. And we need to have, the strong foundation for it to really help the development cause. And making sure that countries have the right governance environment for data is very important for AI, for us and for governments to use AI the way they intended to use it. So I think the discussion around, data governance, data protection, data empowerment is very, very important. And I'm very happy that this topic is a topic of top priority in the bank. Our next World Development Report will be about data and data-driven development. My ask is let's make this topic closer to people more than it is today.
Yeah, that's right. In the panel before, we just were talking about technology empathy and saying here, it's very important that we can anticipate the possibilities of technology, that we can understand how to use them and how they can help us to solve issues, whatever. And we were talking a lot about COVID, but this is not the only issue we can tackle with technology. There are many others. Let's say dealing between different cultures, dealing between different levels of society and so on. Do you have any examples here, or inclusion and so on? Is there some more on your agenda, or is there something experience you can share on that with us?
So definitely the inclusion agenda is very important. And I think, again, if we link it to the COVID discussion, it's very clear that if we don't look deliberately into closing the divides that exist today, and with the new technology, new divides are happening. So, I mean, technology is very powerful in the way that it can give voice to people. It's an equalizer. But without the requisite element, it can be a deeper divider to society. So that would be something. I mean, for us, this is something that is linked to the twin goals about shared prosperity, as I mentioned earlier, about making sure that we eradicate extreme poverty, but without making sure that technology really speaks to everyone, and without very strong emphasis on inclusion, it can create deeper inequalities.
From a, let's say, university standpoint or background from my life, it's not only that we have now the capability of understanding current events better by metrics of algorithms, but also past ones. So when I wrote my PhD in linguistics that's maybe 13 years ago, I would have a pen and a piece of paper, and I would have to like count topoi of my research by hand. Just briefly after that, students started to learn how to code themselves, like these research algorithms, as I want to call them. And of course, then you have more chances to get into available data from before and connect it to what we have now. Because if we want to have societal change, we ought to know where certain things come from in order to then change them. And that's the second point. The data in itself, and Bouthenia said that too, the data in itself is just data. It needs a context and needs the willingness to also produce this context. Like in academia, you might have quantitative and qualitative research. And in many places, also the aforementioned, there is like a trend going to quantitative. And why? Because it's felt like it's the safe bet. So I'm not wrong. I just use the data and I say, here you have it. And but the point is, you need to make something out of this data, like normatively, like saying, this is where we want to go. And of course, this might be like, people might say like, oh no, that's short-sighted. And then you are in an argument about it. But in political science, in the last quarter century, the two most influential books were, in my opinion, Huntington's Clash of Civilization and Fukuyama's The End of History. Those book titles became coined terms. People use it all the time, and it's in newspapers, in magazine articles. Is this the end of history, or is this the Clash of Civilizations? But these were like highly speculative, like books, and they were criticized a lot, also rightfully, as I think. But they were normative claims. So what we now need is also to have the data and really be saying, okay, this is the plan we have with the data, and let's discuss.
Yeah. When we're talking with our startups here, what they wish to have is, sometimes they mention they would love to have like innovation zones in cities and the environments where they can test. And they are really willing to share then the data with the next one, because talking about all these data lakes we are creating currently, they want to make them more public. Is that something in your discussions you have heard in the last months, that more and more organizations or communities, cities are going to collect data in general and share then these kind of data to have a large pool for development possibilities? Bouthenia, you're not in? Yes? Yeah.
Yes, okay. Yes. No, so we're hearing that. We're hearing also from, you mentioned the entrepreneurs, and we're hearing also very strong request for, better ecosystem to support new ideas. So there is a lot of movement, there is a lot of traction. And if there is a good environment for these ideas to surface, I think we will be only limited by the limitation of our imagination. But with the right environment, with the data, like I don't recall the exact number of the amount of data that is generated on a daily basis, and now with the widespread penetration of mobile phone, I mean, it's just incredible the amount of data that is produced on a daily basis. And when it's put to the right use, this is we speak about this being the oil of the new economy. So there is so much richness out there. So with the right environment and with the support for the entrepreneurs to have access to this within, of course, framework of data privacy and governance, I think the possibilities are endless to support humanity.
Yeah. Alexander, maybe before you answer, just let me say for all the people in the chat who are listening us, if you have any questions, please put them to the chat, and then I can read them out. But switching to Alexander now.
Yeah, I feel like that's all true what Bouthenia said on a general large global scale, hopefully. But like in the German case, we just unfortunately still see the opposite. Like this government and the chancellor, who has done a great job during all her tenures in tackling crisis, is not a visionary. So the idea, like to establish a forward-looking meadow of ideas, and even this is like in the crisis, like freelancers did not get anything. It's like it was very difficult for them, and only the free liberals would be in the parliament saying we need to do something for the freelancers, which I equal now with people working in the creative industry and in the digital industry. We don't have, unfortunately, in Germany, like the Googles and the Facebooks where you hear like in New York make like high six figures if you're out of college. So like that's a different scenario. So I feel, unfortunately, in the German case, there needs lots to be done to like enable like this grassrooty sort of like innovationally like ambience.
Thank you. So looking to our chat, if there's something. So Carsten is asking us, please can you say something more about the dependency on AI, maybe in case of a stroke? So something about existing and possible backup solution, security of supply, safety, something like this. Thanks. So technical questions here. Is there any?
Well, I wouldn't know anything about like the terms of stroke. I have been talking a few weeks back with Sebastian Truhn, like the Stanford guy, and he has been doing like lots of work on breast cancer, and saying like how much the samples digitally provided and overseen by an algorithm do help you to recognize breast cancer like very quickly, because obviously you have all the samples, and you know, I mean, if you are in a rural, or like now in the pandemic where you cannot go to a doctor all the time, or you fear of getting COVID, whatever, of course it shows us that like e-doctoring, or whatever you want to call it, has a grand future ahead because of AI. But again, it also needs to be supervised in the end by a human being.
All right, so we don't have more questions here and our time is running, but I would like to thank both of you for your time, for dialing in that morning from the US. I have now a lot of new points in my agenda, so I thought that was a fruitful discussion, and I wish you both all the best to keep and to go on with your ideas to realize that. Bouthenia, thank you very much for participating. Alexander, thank you very much for participating. It was a great moment for us here. Thank you.